I did a video recently covering all of the Sword and Shield era booster boxes cooling off, right? A lot of them were cooling off in price. Some of them, in fact, were actually dropping. Lost Origin was going down, Fusion Strike was going down, and even Alolan Skies just kind of wasn't doing anything. But what about the big chase cards of Sword and Shield? Now, I predicted that it would be a bubble. I predicted that it was just a lot of hype and that the cards and the prices would cool off and drop, similar to the Sun and Moon era. Well, that's exactly what's happening. And so today, we'll be taking a look at the fall of the prices of the big Sword and Shield alt arts. Some of them are quite bad. Let's get into it. Right, so today we'll take a look at PokeJace at a bunch of the top cards from the Sword and Shield era. We're going to see their graded prices. We're going to see their raw prices compared to on TCG Player, eBay, and the European markets to see how well these cards have performed. A lot of them have been going down in price. It's going the same way as the Sun and Moon Big Boom that we saw last year. So you always be cautious at buying a lot of these cards if you're looking to add them into your collection or if you're looking to potentially invest in these in the long run. Let's jump into it. So, alright, starting things off with Silver Tempest. Of course, the big chase card is the Lugia from the set. The set has some weak alt arts in it as well. You've got the Regidrago and the Alphabet Soup Unknown, which aren't the best. And of course, then you've got the lone little skunk tank there set at $7. So we're not really caring about those ones. We're looking at the big boys and we're looking at Lugia. So let's take a look at the Lugia and we can get an idea of what has been going on with the price, of course, and the value of Lugia. So here we're looking at eBay 187, TCG Player 193, car market 233. Then we've got PSA 10 at $372, over nearly 8,500 in a PSA 10. That's wild. And then a 9, you're looking at basically the same value as it raw with nearly 4,500. So when we take a look at these, we'll take a look at the graded price first. Let's take a look at the graded price and we can see. So we got a PSA 10. So it was trickling along, running so business over the past 6 months, and then it did reach a high of 470. So it's dropped about $100 in value from a PSA 10 over the past maybe 2 to 3 months. So, okay, so it has fallen in a PSA. But let's look at the raw price now. So we look at TCG Player and the raw price. So we saw the boom happen, right? So around April, it then started to trickle up, bam, 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 all the way up to like $200. And it's slowly cooling off. Not by much, because it's still sat around the top about 180 to 190. So the Lugia actually hasn't been doing too bad. Silver Tempest is getting more expensive, is getting a little bit hard to get hold of, and you know, it is the big chase card in the set. But apart from Lugia, the set's not doing very well. So raw price, this one's actually holding quite well. This is actually one of the ones I did see the other day. This is one of the ones I did see that wasn't doing too bad. So that's fine, you know, easing us into it for today. But the graded price is doing not great, pretty bad. Lost Origin, arguably one of the best sets in the Sword and Shield era, especially one of the main sets anyway. Let's get into this. We've got the Aerodactyl and the Gutina, which are the two big chase cards in the set. We've got the Rotom, which is kind of just doing its own thing. And we've got the Berserker as well. So first off, we're going to take a look at the Aerodactyl. Right, we're going to see where this one is. This is my favorite card in the set. So let's take a look at this one. So this one's been sat at around about $100, 110 to 120 on card market. We're looking around 280 in a PSA 10 with only 2,000, so a lot less than that Lugia than we saw. All right, not too bad. So we look at the PSA 10 price of this one, and then we can see where it is. So it did actually go to as high as around 350, and it started to cool off a little bit and dropped around about $70 to $80 in value. Okay, so it has been dropping in the PSA 10. That's fine. Raw price, let's see where it is. So we have TCG Player in the orange. So TCG Player was going a much higher. So again, sometimes when it comes to TCG Player, you've got to be careful with these somewhat inflated prices. So the average market price is around 117, whereas TCG Player was trading at around 130. And now you can see, like when people say like these cards are dropping, you look on TCG Player and you see the graphs, and these cards are on the downward trend, right? And you're like, oh no, they're dropping. But in actual fact, they're matching the rest of the market, right? So now it's taken TCG Player to get down to that normal base level with everything else, which is where it should be. So Aerodactyl, not doing too bad. When we look at the big boy Gutina, so this one's going to be a really interesting one to look at. So we got here eBay 355, TCG Player 380, car market 453. So car market is quite pricey. So here we got PSA 10 at $730. That's a big money card, big money card. 4,500 to 10. It's actually worth grading, and even getting a 9 is not too bad. But anything less than that is going to be pretty brutal. So let's take a look at the graded price of the Giratina. So the Giratina, we did see a high of $953, and it has dropped nearly, well, over $200. It's dropped $220 in a PSA 10 over the last like 2 months. That's crazy. That's a big drop, huge drop. Maybe more people are getting it graded, but that's quite interesting. So let's look at the raw price. Again, we're seeing TCG Player trail above the market price. Now, keep this in mind. The market price takes into consideration this high card market value as well, and TCG Player is still higher. That's crazy. So yeah, it's going to keep going up and up and up and up. And if I'm being honest, you know, we saw the Giratina reach $500 in TCG Player, and since then it has dropped, what, 100 and probably around about $100 over the past 2 months. So this card is losing value. So compared to Lugia, Giratina is losing a big chunk of change, around about 30%. It has lost, if not a little bit more than 30%. So quite a bit. Right, we're going to look at Pokemon Go. I rarely ever talk about Pokemon Go, like ever. You know, I know you guys love it. It's your favorite set. Don't deny it. So Pokemon Go, we've got the Mewtwo. We're not going to talk about the Conkeldurr. Let's look at the Mewtwo. I'm intrigued. I haven't seen this in ages. It's quite an interesting one to look at Pokemon Go. Not really, but we'll see. So we're looking at this one. Actually, wow. Okay, so we're looking here. So it's about $20, right? 27 on card market, quite high. And then we're looking around about $70 in a PSA 10. So not the most impressive, right? Of course, but still, you know, more than 3 times the value in a PSA 10. So when we go over here and we'll take a look at the graded price. Take a look at the graded price first, right? PSA 10 graded price of this one. It's actually been going up, right? Looking around $50, $60. And it went up to 80, dropped a little bit, but it's still actually above where it was 6 months ago. Hey, look, Pokemon Go is doing things. All right, raw price, however, going up. It's gone up. So it did actually dip to as low as around $15 or so here and there. And then we saw TCG Player shoot right up to 30 and then start to cool off again. So again, we're seeing that spike at the same time period, around that May, June time. So again, we're seeing the trend with TCG Player with these inflated prices, and then started to cool down around that May, June time. So we're seeing that reprint over and over again with a lot of these. So interesting TCG Player. All right, now onto Astral Radiance, back to a proper set right away from Pokemon Go. We have the Machamp, which is of course the most expensive card, still sitting at a nice hefty $160. But then we got the Dialga, we got the Power Cure as well, Beedrill. These cards have been slightly ticking up in value, so more of the lower tier arts that we're starting to see are ticking up ever so slightly. So nothing like insane, but yeah. So let's look at the Machamp. Let's look at the Machamp and see how well the Machamp has been doing. So we're looking 133 on eBay, 159 on TCG Player, 129 on card market. Not too bad. So then PSA 10, we're looking at $260, 2,500 in a 10. So actually this one's probably been doing really well. Let's take a look at this one. So PSA 10, look at this. PSA 10 of Machamp is doing insanely well. $150, going up to nearly, well, actually over 300. Yeah, alright, it's dropped down back down to 260, but compared to the other sets, the Machamp is performing very well in Astral Radiance compared to the big other alt arts. That's actually quite interesting. One of the, I wouldn't say weaker alt arts, like top alt arts from a set, but doing very well on the PSA. Let's take a look at the raw price of this though. So in the graded, it's doing well, and in the raw price, it's doing well. Again, look at that May. You see the trend? Look, the market matching all the way, but then TCG Player breaks away in May, and in June takes the Machamp up to $200 nearly, whereas the rest of the market was sat at 140, 150, and then now they're somewhat close, but still not quite. So again, the inflated price of TCG Player, really interesting though. Machamp is doing good. Next up, we have Brilliant Stars, which is an incredible set. We've got the big boy Charizard is the big art on the set. Although the trainer gallery cards have started to trickle up in value. We see the Umbreon here. We've got the other Umbreon. Even things like the gold and the other trainer galleries are actually starting to trickle up. The other arts in the set, like the Honchkrow, the Luminon, Arceus, kind of been staying pretty steady, not really doing much. Let's take a look at the Charizard. So Zardy Boy, not doing the best. So let's take a look at this. So 155 on eBay, 159 on TCG Player, 155 on card market. Pretty similar across all three there. PSA 10 at $300, nearly 9,000 in a PSA 10. Holy smokes. Then in a PSA 9, it's actually less than the raw value. So It's going to be a tough card to get graded, I think. But, you know, if you can get a 10, you can get a 10. So let's look at the graded price first of the Big Boy Zard. And we've started to see it actually higher than it once was, right? We go back to where it is now. $300 was better than it was 6 months ago. Not as highest, of course, at $400 for a PSA 10. But I think just the sheer number of PSA 10s of this card is what's driving the price down a little bit. And then let's look at the raw price. So this is, again, this is what I'm talking about with the somewhat interesting TCG player prices. So TCG player was always amongst the market price, just slightly higher, but pretty much with the market price. And then again, in May, it broke away and the Charizard went up to $200 and everyone's like, look, Charizard's on the climb up. But on the market, it was still $170. So, you know, you got to be careful with TCG players sometimes. That's why I like looking at PokeDRO, because it gives me an idea of what's happening across the markets, not just TCG player. You know, you got to look around. So we take a look and it has now started to match each other at that 160. So we start to see here and we're like, this is the drop of, you know, the old arts. Well, actually, yes and no. It's the drop of the TCG player price, though, arts, but not necessarily the market. All right, on to Fusion Strike. Fusion Strike's got some interesting ones, right? It really does. So, of course, we've got the Gengar, the Espeon, and the Mew. So we're going to be looking at these three top ones today. And then you've got the other old arts, which are kind of just doing their own thing, not really doing much. I mean, we see the Celebi went up a little bit, the Mew's gone up a little bit here and there. But let's take a look at the Mew VMAX first, because this one has, as far as I know, has been going up. So let's take a look. So raw prices for this one, 81. Well, there's got a bit of variety there. 81 on eBay, 94 and 95 on TCG Player, and then 110 on Card Market. This card is all over the show. PSA 10, 171, 3010. This is going to be, I've never pulled this card before. Never pulled this card before. Let's look at the PSA 10 price. This one has been going up. So we look now 171 over the past 6 months, and it was sat at $100. Not the highest, but near enough the highest. So this one actually has been going up in the graded price. But what about the raw price? So the raw price again is definitely up, right? Again, we're starting to see in May pretty much level, and then TCG Player started to break away a little bit, not quite as bad as some of the others. So even now we're looking at 95 to 81 raw compared to where it was 6 months ago. This card's gone up, so that's good. This card is making, you know, pretty steady gains month by month. Then we have the Espeon. This one's a whole different story. 196 on eBay, 280 on TCG Player, 277 on Card Market. Weird prices. PSA 10 nearly $400 with over 5,000 in a 10. PSA 9 we're looking, well, you would think roughly the same value, but with Card Market and TCG Player, not necessarily. So let's take a look at the graded price first, and we can see where it is in a PSA 10. So it is higher than it was 6 months ago in a PSA 10. It was around $200. Now we're looking at $388. So this one regarding a PSA 10 is definitely worth it. It's nearly doubled in value, which is pretty insane. Now this is the insane part. I want you guys to look at this one. So this card's been trailing neck and neck with the market and TCG Player for the longest time, but slowly gaining value, right? Then May came along, okay? And everyone talked about the big boom of the Espeon. And even I did in a previous video. I looked on TCG Player, I was like, look at this, guys. This is insane. Look how much has gone up. Now, yes, it has gone up over time, right? We've seen over the past 6 months, it's climbing month by month to get to that point. You know, we're looking at the end of May where it's reached that $200 mark. Fair enough. That is what I would call just natural growth progression of a Fusion Strike Alt Art. And then TCG Player just kind of had their own way and then jumped it from $200 all the way up to $350. Whereas the rest of the market was trailing at around that 200 to 220, did trickle up to 270 at one point, and was like, actually, no, I'm going to settle back down at that 200 to 220. Whereas on TCG Player, it's still a lot higher. We're looking at $80 difference. That's insane. Like, that's crazy. Then we have the Gengar, the big boy Gengar. Again, this is an interesting one. 320 on eBay, 310 on TCG Player, 400 on the Card Market. Crazy. Over here in the UK, I've been seeing people sell this for like 350. It's wild. I don't know why it sells for so much, but there you go. So $633 at a PSA 10 with 6,000, 309, and then we have the rest. So let's take a look at the prices of this one. I think this one's probably dropped, I think. So we're looking at the graded price. So it's not the highest it once was, but it's still higher on 6 months, which is pretty good going. and we started to see this card at around $750, nearly $800. Yeah, $800 in a PSA 10. So it's actually dropped $170 in value in a PSA 10, which is quite a lot. So let's look at the market price of the Gengar. So overall, the Gengar is still up from where it was 6 months ago, of course, but it has been dropping in its overall value. Now, compared to some of the others, the TCG player didn't really go crazy with this one compared to some of the others that we've seen, right? So that's quite interesting. So we're looking at this one. TCG player went a little bit higher, but they pretty much came neck and neck with each other there, and they pretty much stayed pretty steady. So it did reach the high of $400 and is now starting to trickle down. So it's lost about $80 in the past 2 months. So about 20%. That's not too bad compared to some of the others, but it is falling. The graded price, though, has fallen quite a bit. Alright, we've got Alolan Skies. We've got quite a few cards, of course, in Alolan Skies, potentially for us to look at today. So I'm not going to look at all of them, because there's so many, and a lot of them have a lot of value. And of course, we'll be looking at the top ones. But as a rule, across the board, the lower tier value cards have been going up in Alolan Skies, right? So we'll say lower value, as in like the other alt arts, right? The Noivern's been going up, the Leafeon, the Espeon, like the V alt arts have been doing very well. And even the rainbows, like we have the Leafeon here at 54, Umbreon at 54, Sylveon at 51. Like these cards were nowhere near this expensive. I mean, look, even Rayquaza at 48. You know, we've got the Golurk who's actually going up, the Duraludon who's going up. So we're actually getting non-evolution cards going up. But we're looking at the big ones today. So let's look at the Moonbreon. So we have the Moonbreon here. We're looking at 750 on eBay, 860 and 700 on card market. This card has fallen. Over here in the UK, the card price of this does vary, all depending on condition. It really is like, in some cases you can see like £100 or more like price difference. It's crazy between people selling. PSA 10 price $1,200, 11,500 in a PSA 10. That's crazy. I have one in a PSA 10 and it's really interesting. I am going to do an upcoming video where I'll be going through my graded cards and see where they are now compared to 6 months ago and see if they've gained or lost value. I have a feeling that a lot of them have probably lost value, but we'll see. So PSA 10 of the Moonbreon, it is actually higher than it once was 6 months ago. So for instance, if I had to do mine for the video, of course, my Moonbreon has actually gained value over the past 6 months in a PSA 10. Was 800 and is now 1,200. So that's really good, right? But it has fallen from the high of nearly, well, basically 1,500. That's crazy. So it's dropped to like $200 in the past like 2 months. But again, it's just so swingy, this card. It's just absolutely crazy. Let's take a look at the raw price. So again, following the trend, in May, TCG Player has a mind of its own and made the Moonbreon more expensive than it was. So we've been seeing here, neck and neck all the way, pretty average. Then when May comes along, TCG Player takes the Moonbreon up to $950. But then on the market price, we see the card about $60 less. So still went up with it, but nowhere near as high. And then they're still not quite close to each other as they once were. So the card has dropped, still higher than it was 6 months ago, of course, but it has been falling. Now the big boy Rayquaza has been doing relatively well. So we're looking at 358, 445 on TCG Player and 265. Look at that pricing. Look at it. That is $100 difference between each one. That's wild. PSA 10, $600 was 7,500 in a 10. That is crazy. We're going to take a look at this raw price in a minute. So PSA 10, again, up over the 6 month period. Still very good. It has been dropping though from the high of around $700. It's dropped around about $100 or so in a PSA 10. Not too bad. Let's take a look at the raw price. Oh, baby. So as we can see, again, neck and neck most of the way between the market and TCG Player. And following the trend, in May, we saw the Rayquaza go from 360 all the way up to 550, whereas the rest of the market was at 400. So it was $150 difference between TCG Player and the rest of the market. And then it has fallen since then. So it's still up on the 6 months, but it has fallen from its heyday. I mean, look, if you look at the average market price, it's 360, right? 360. TCG Player had it at 550. That's nearly $200 difference. It's just crazy. It's just crazy, right? So even now, where they're sat, there are $100 difference between the two market prices. We've got the Leafeon VMAX art as well. This one's, again, quite interesting. Price is a bit different from TCG Player compared to the rest. We're going to get into the market prices. So we got PSA 10, 355, over 5,000 PSA 10. So quite interesting. It's weird, right? Look at this. TCG player, 335. PSA 10, $9 more. Surely just go and buy PSA 10, right? So let's take a look at what has been going on. PSA 10, we see, doing relatively well. Yeah, $350 up on the past 6 months. Has fallen a little bit, but still doing relatively well. Now let's look at the raw price. TCG player. TCG player. So again, pretty level most of the way. TCG player started to break away when it started to come into May, and then they were pretty close here. Fair enough. Towards the end of May, they were pretty close, and then this happened. So as you can see, the market was pretty close. We're at $300, and the market was like, you know what, this isn't right. So this card started to fall at $250, whereas TCG player kept going up, and it kept going up, and kept going up, and it stayed at like $100 difference. Wild. It's just crazy. Then we have the Glaceon OR VMAX, 237 on eBay, 311 on TCG player, 252 on card market, $324 in a PSA 10, 5,200 graded. This is going to be another interesting one, I have a feeling. So PSA 10, this one's doing really well on a PSA 10, $325 up from $200, doing very well. Has fallen a little bit, but not by much. Now the raw price. TCG player, again neck and neck most of the way, pretty level with each other, and then following the trend. So the card average market price was around 200, and it did trickle up to now sit around 230, whereas TCG player broke from 200 and decided to take this card all the way up to 315 and pretty much stay there. So this card is a $80 difference between the average market price and TCG player. It's just crazy, some of the stuff that we see on TCG player, but again, another card which has been affected by inflated TCG player prices. And then finally we have the Sylveon, my favourite card from the set, yet to get this in the PSA 10. Nearly $200 on eBay, 232 on TCG player, and 208 on card market. This one's a little bit more reasonable. 320 in the PSA 10 was nearly 7,000 in the 10. I need to get mine graded. Hopefully it gets a 10 though. So let's look at the PSA 10 price. So again, up on the 6 months. Graded prices, a lot of these cards have been doing relatively well. I have to admit, even though the raw prices have been falling, or have they? So again, pretty neck and neck most of the way, and again we see that breakaway this time towards the end of May rather than the beginning of May. So the raw price was sat around 200 and did dip below 200, whereas TCG player took it all the way up to 270 and then started to drop a little bit. So again, at one point it was $70 difference and is now sat at around about $40 difference. So it's coming down a little bit from its high. Again, if you start seeing these prices, you're like, look at it, it's 270, and you're like, look, it's now 190. This card's dropped by $80. It hasn't really. It's just the fact is that TCG player is just price is just way out of link with anything else. Chillrain, Chillin' Pain next. Now a lot of these cards have been going up in value. They have, right? The Moltres has been going up. The Blaziken, not so much. We'll get to that in a minute. Shk Rex is doing very well. Articuno, my favorite card in the whole of Sword and Shield era, is doing relatively well. We start to see the Rapidash start to climb. Pretty much all the ORs, like Alolan Skies, are starting to climb, and they're doing relatively well. Let's take a look at the Flaming Chicken. So the Flaming Chicken, we got nearly 300 on eBay, 343 on TCG player, and 219 on card market. So a lot less on card market. $461 for the Blaziken, 3,000 in the PSA 10. I have a feeling that the PSA price is going to be pretty reasonable. So yeah, it has gone up quite a bit over the past 6 months, falling a little bit from its all-time high, but still doing relatively well in the PSA 10 slot. And then again, TCG player had a mind of its own. Although we have seen the market price actually overtake TCG player at one point during April, and then it corrected itself and stayed pretty steady along the way, where TCG player was like, hold my beer, I'm going to go above you. So they were neck and neck at 280, and the market stayed pretty much around that 280, 290, whereas TCG player went all the way up to $400. So it went up $120 more than the market price. That is crazy from TCG player regarding the Blaziken. But now we're looking at about $50 difference, so it has come down from that $120 difference. But yeah, pretty weird one. But yeah, the Blaziken is starting to cool off. No pun intended from the Chillrain set, but it is falling. We took a look at a climber though. We've got the Shk Rex, which has been doing very well. $88 on eBay, $115 on TCG player, 75 on card market, 180 in a PSA 10. Not the most insane, but still pretty reasonable. PSA 10 though, look at this. I mean, 180, it was sat around 80, so it's getting $100 in value. That's insane. So doing very well. Sometimes the biggest cards aren't always the biggest cards, right? However, TCG Player, again, showing us it has a mind of its own. At the end of May, they were pretty much neck and neck at around $80. And then the raw price did go up to around nearly 90, whereas TCG Players like Hold My Beer, I'm going to go up to 115. So again, breaking away there at around $30 difference for the Shadow Rider. And then finally, out of all the sets of Vault Arts, we have Battle Styles. Now, again, we've had some big climbers as well, and we've had some that have fallen. So, for instance, we take a look at this Single Strike Urshifu Alt Art VMAX. This one has actually done relatively well. So, we're looking around 36, 53 on TCG Player, 40 on card market, 100 in a PSA 10. Only 500. That's quite interesting. So, PSA 10 hasn't really done much, right? The price has stayed pretty steady. But if we look at the raw price of this card, it has actually grown. Again, TCG Player having a mind of its own. Pretty much neck and neck all the way. And then we're looking around May, it was around $35. And the average market price went up to $37. So it went up $2. That's it. During that period. Whereas TCG Player went from $33 all the way up to $54. So $2 difference or over $20 difference. Doesn't quite add up. And then finally, we got my boy T-Tart coming in, of course. $130 on eBay, $166 on TCG Player, and $110 on card market. PSA 10, we look at $280. That is a big increase on a PSA 10 price. I've got one in a PSA 8, which is quite brutal. It's $70 in a PSA 8. It's actually worth more if I take it out of the slab. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. So let's take a look at the raw price of this, the graded price of this one. So it has fallen a little bit from its high at $350, but still up by $70 or so over the past 6 months. And then raw price for the Sleepy Boy, again TCG Player playing its own game here, but pretty much neck and neck most of the way, and then it has actually declined over the past 2 months on both markets, going from 150 down to 130 on the market, and then TCG Player went from 160 up to 190 and has now come back down a little bit to 166. So yeah, another one that's fallen, even though the PSA 10 price is doing very well. So there you have it, guys. That's what's been going on in the Sword and Shield era regarding some of the biggest cards. Shady stuff between the average market price and TCG Player. We see the trends when you hit around May and June. These cards just start breaking away. Some of them were neck and neck, but most of them were highly inflated. So when we look at TCG Player and we see a lot of these cards, we're like, wow, look at the growth they've made. Oh my god, look at the decline that's happened. It hasn't really shown the true picture, the whole, story. Because over here in the UK and over in the EU and card market, things are very, very different when you look at different card prices. Like we saw some of those cards, I think it was like the Rayquaza, it was like $100 difference between the 3 different markets. It's just absolutely crazy. So you always got to be careful when you look at picking up some of these cards. Make sure the condition's good. Make sure that you're paying the right price. And, shop around. Genuinely shop around. Don't just look at TCG Player, look elsewhere. But overall, the Sword and Shield era cards have been falling. Some have been making gains, especially in the graded section, but then some have made declines. Some of the big chase cards are starting to cool off. The Moonbreon, the Giratina and the like have been cooling off. Same with the Charizard. So overall, I think that it's nice to see that the cards are actually going back to where they should be. Well, ideally where they should be. Not really highly inflated. But that is it from me, guys, in today's video. If you made this far into the video, make sure to smash the like button, make sure to subscribe for more Pokemon content, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments about what's been going on in the market in the Sword and Shield era and the difference between the rest of the market and TCG Player, because it is kind of odd. But if you watch more Pokemon content, make sure to click the video on the screen. But that is it from me, guys, in today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.